Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the self-knowledge lectures. Today we have our lecture number 38. Okay, everything is okay with the audio. We have our lecture number 38 of the phase A of the self-knowledge course that, as you know, have the purpose of giving you all the necessary tools and information so you can travel your inner path towards self-knowledge and towards self-realization. And today we are going to be studying why this path, this inner path towards self-realization is difficult. And we are going to be talking about the Christic work. So, as always, if you have any question in relation to this topic or in relation to this self-knowledge course, you can leave your questions down there in the comment box, and I will gladly solve any question that you have at the end of the explanation of this topic. Okay, so let's start by seeing what are the objectives of today's lecture. Things okay. Let me just check it. Let me check something. No, let me just fix something here quickly because I am receiving some errors in the broadcast. So let me fix something here and we'll start. I'm going to be checking if everything is okay. Okay, I think it's better there. Well, the objectives. In this lecture, we are going to understand why the path towards self-realization is difficult, as I was saying. And, well, we are going to know what are the obstacles, the most common obstacles that we are going to encounter when we undertake this path. And also, we are going to be studying how to transcend them, how to transcend all those obstacles, as well as we are going to talk about the possible forms of self-deception in which we could fall. Okay, the path towards self-realization is difficult, without a doubt. That path that leads to enlightenment is not at all an easy path to travel. It is really very difficult. Otherwise, the vast majority of us will already be awakened, right? Enlightened. Since without a doubt, in many of our multiple existences, we have had this knowledge, the knowledge of the path that leads to self-realization. However, we are still here, asleep and lost, okay? And that's because there are many reasons why this path is very difficult. And the main one, I would say, is the fact that to travel it, we must constantly face and defeat ourselves. And that is the strongest word. This path is very difficult. This path is known actually as the path of the razor's edge, because it has dangers on one side and the other side, and each step carries pain. Many people start this path, but very rare are those who reach the goal. Even though it is a difficult and a painful path, it is undoubtedly the only one that is really worth traveling. Because, well, not all is bad, not all is difficult. There are very good things, actually amazing things in this path. And this is the path that leads us to total liberation, to the awakening of 100% of our consciousness, returning to the boson of our cosmic common father, but now having achieved wisdom, having achieved mastery, and having become creator gods to be part of the army of the voice or the great word, the one that resonates throughout the universe. So let's analyze what are those obstacles that make this path difficult so that we learn how to transcend those obstacles and move forward in this inner work. Well, the first obstacle that we are going to find is our ego, and more specifically, that dark side of ourselves that we don't know or that we don't accept that we have. As I was saying, the most difficult thing is to face ourselves, decide to discover and recognize that we are not the jewels of people that we think we are, and that we must open ourselves to discover all the perversity that resides within us. Actually, we love our ego very much. We justify all the times our mistakes. We tend to overlook many very perverse details that are manifested in us at every time, and we reach such a point of self-deception that we don't see them. We barely know a very small part of our psychology, since we have a very stunted sense of self-observation because we just don't use it. We get used to all the time looking outwards, looking, pointing, criticizing, judging what other people do without ever realizing that we are only projecting that unknown and dark side of us onto other people. But we are not even willing to recognize that we point, that we criticize in others, in ourselves. And it happens that when we have many things in ourselves that we don't know and that we don't accept, then those things tend to complicate our lives terribly. And thanks to this, we live attracting all kinds of difficult circumstances and difficult people into our lives that are all the time generating conflicts. Since if we are not well related to ourselves, we will not be ever well related to others either. And the result will be conflicts of all kinds. So when we want to embark on this path towards self-knowledge, which is undoubtedly the only path that can lead us to enlightenment, we understand the need to observe ourselves. That is like very important. Self-observation is actually like bringing light or that light of the consciousness to that dark side of ourselves. But one begins to self-observe and one begins to discover many things that we didn't even suspect that we had. We begin to discover that we are such liars, lazy, treacherous, unfair, unbalanced, tyrannical, cruel, ill-intentioned, weak, perverts, degenerate. And to the extent that we are bringing more and more light towards our inner darkness, then the deeper and the more difficult things start being discovered about ourselves that actually can even frighten us and make us, with all of our self-sympathy, with that overflowing self-love that we have, that we want to run away from this. And we just leave behind this work of psychological death, and we tend to decide, on some other path that promises heaven or enlightenment by just believing in someone or in something, or just by consuming certain substance, or by giving some constant amount of money, because that is easier than facing ourselves. Actually, and I like always say it, there is a phrase that I like a lot from a famous psychoanalyst that used to say that no one becomes enlightened by fantasizing figures of light, but by making his own darkness conscious. And there in that unconsciousness of ourselves and in that subconsciousness, 97% of our essence is there, is trapped. And only by observing it, observing our own darkness and eliminating it, can we truly get to rescue and get to awaken our consciousness. If we don't decide to start this work of self-discovery through the constant practice of the self-observation, we will spend another existence believing that we are doing very well and believing ourselves to be victims of the circumstances and of people, all the time seeing the perversion outside, the corruption outside, but never recognizing it within us. And actually that is the second aspect that makes this path so difficult. That fact that we don't accept that what we criticize so much in others, that we all the time are pointing out in others, is something that actually rests on the dark side of ourselves and that we don't know or we don't want to recognize, because the ego is offended when it sees its reflection. And I will feel like the urge, I will never feel the urge of changing if I am convinced that the bad guy is the other, that the pervert is the other, that the corrupt are those from the government, the degenerates are those, the criminals on TV or on YouTube, but not me, because I'm blameless, I'm honorable. And since we don't want even remotely see that what bothers us so much in others is an aspect that has not been worked in ourselves, because we don't have the slightest understanding in reflection in relation to that thing. We haven't ever reflected about that within ourselves. In our interior, our inner perversion is hidden, and it's all the time pointing offended towards the outside. So we get like stuck because, like stagnated, because we understand that we don't need to change. The one that has to change is my neighbor, my partner, my father, my brother, but not me. I'm such an angel. Or if I'm not an angel, I mean I'm just a good person. So when we see in another, that is like the mirror law. It is very important. When we see in another something that bothers us, that generates like rejection or irritation in us, let's remember that law of the mirror. The one that says that everything that bothers me, irritates me, angers me, or that I want to change in another is because it is inside of me. That mirror law is something that if we use it in our benefit, if we work with that, we are going to advance fast in this inner path. So through that self-observation, we can get, if we are all the time using people as a mirror, we are going to be discovering all those defects in our interior that are most of the time repressed and that are there from the other pole, pointing out. But without a doubt, we are going to find all those details in which that defect is constantly manifested through our centers, and we are going to be able to eliminate it so we can advance in this inner path. And well, the third aspect why this path is difficult is because it is a path full of dangers, inside and out. When we start this path, when we want to rise up from all those sinister forces that want to keep us there asleep and fascinated with the world, to just continue feeding energetically on us, we then notice that All of that is our reality, and we'll start feeling like that need of freeing ourselves. And what happens at the Black Lodge comes over us. Both the external Black Lodge, all those entities that actually exist in this world, and the internal Black Lodge, that are all of our psychological defects. Actually, when we decide to start working on ourselves, all of our psychological defects make us like a war in us. They are going to generate inside of us a lot of ill will, to do the practices, to try to awaken our consciousness, a lot of ill will to abandon our bad habits, to achieve chastity. They are going to generate in us a lot of desires, of a lot of things. In addition to the fact that as we advance, the temptations are going to be stronger and stronger. Since only by denying to all of this, only by denying our desires, we can rescue the light and the fire that is trapped in each one of those desires. And we need to know that the greater the temptation that we refuse, the greater the reward that we are going to receive. If we deny that desire, if we eliminate that psychological defect, we are going to be rescuing the virtues of our soul. Because from the death of the ego, the virtues, the powers, and all the positive faculties of our consciousness are rescued. But we will also have, because those are like the internal attacks that we are going to receive. But we are also have to face external attacks. Immediately a person, for example, stops fornicating, starts balancing his centers, manages to light his sacred fire of the Kundalini, and internally receives his little silver sword, in the astral world. The Black Lodge, the external Black Lodge, comes upon him to try to snatch it away from him, to try to take him to lose his sexual energy, to lose strength, and that to come back to become like another body for this society. And all these Black Lodge, they are not coming like demons. They are not coming like I don't know, people with black, I don't know, dresses or whatever. No, they will come as attractive people, for example, who seek to seduce us so that we fall into temptation, or very lovely people in which that are trying there for us to fall in love, or for us to start being unfaithful to our partner so that we return to fornication, or that way. Or they will come as people with very fascinating theories who seek, to confuse us and fascinate us and go out to the path of the pseudo-esotericism. Or they will come as guides. They will pretend to be masters to whom we have to follow in order to advance, and that to take us and deviate us from the path. Or they can come as people who bring us great economic opportunities that will solve all of our economic problems. But that if we take those opportunities, we are going to be without any time or energy for the inner work and to work on the awakening of our consciousness. That is why we need to be like very alert and be like all the time in self-observation, practicing the psychological death, because you are going to see that the psychological death is the one that is going to allow us to unblock our path, go advance, and not to be distracted by any of this. Okay, so we must know, and that is something like very important also, that the external Black Lodge can only tempt us through our internal Black Lodge. And what does this mean? Let me make this clearer for you. If we are eliminating from our interior our lustful defects, our unfaithful defects, our betrayals, our fanatical defects, our mythomaniac, our intellectual defects, our proud, our greed, for example, then that external black lodge won't have any way to seduce us or to make us lose our way. That is why the practice of the psychological death is the one that is going to allow us to advance in this path, like breaking with all these obstacles. Of course, along with the other two factors for the consciousness revolution. Well, another big obstacle on this path is the self-delusion. That tends to happen a lot when we enter, for example, these studies, and we right away begin to feel, good, like we are good people. We start feeling safe, we start feeling holy, we start feeling that we already have the truth. We start, falling into the traps of the ego. So we learn these topics, and we believe that because we handle them very well, that we understand them, we are already better than others. And we even start seeing others as inferior to us, those that don't recognize the knowledge. They are the worst. And it even happens that we start working on ourselves, and we realize that we have many psychological defects, and that we must stop wasting our valuable sexual energy, and that we need to start working on ourselves. And we go ahead and we abandon few vices, we eliminate a few defects, like the grossest ones, and we begin to even teach this knowledge, and we achieve a certain advance. And what happens? We start entering into a state of passivity. We begin to feel that we are doing very well. We start even living to feel that we are already awakened, that we are doing what we had to do, and that we are, doing very good. But what happens? That on the inner path, there is an important key. When we believe that we are going very well, in reality, it is because we are going very badly. And when we believe that we are going very badly, it happens that we are going very well. And why? Because when we think that things are going very well, it is actually because we have entered the path of the fanaticism or the path of the mythomania. We have lowered our guard, we stopped self-observing, we stop judging ourselves ruthlessly, and that way we stop that process of self-discovery of our own evilness and of our own darkness. A person who begins to uncover his own inner darkness, to discover his own rottenness and his own inner misery, and start rescuing the light that is trapped in his own darkness and doesn't hide from it, each time is going deeper into more subtle and more perverse aspect of himself, and it's all the time going to discover every time more and more terrible things. And that is why this work is constant. It is not something to just work a little and stop and sit feeling like we are already there, that we are holy enough. No, at all. Actually, this work has to be there all the time, constant, and this work doesn't end until it ends, until you reach the total liberation. At the moment in which we begin to feel good and elevated, in that moment in which we start feeling like if we are already awakened, and that we start feeling like if we are superior to others, it is because we have deviated and we have taken the path of self-delusion. A person who is in constant self-discovery will have more and more clear all the time the need that he has to change and how much undone work is still inside, you know. Still in the work of the second mountain is that Christic force that is going to be born in us as we studied in the study of the Christmas, the one that will continue to eliminate all the dark aspect of our psychological moon, that is our hidden moon, and is going to work against our causal selves or the seven deadly sins that are like the seeds of all of our ego. So there is a lot of work undone still. So feeling that we are great and that we are doing well, when we have barely like begun this work, is a terrible, terrible obstacle to our progress. And as you can see, also we are going to like unblock this obstacle with the work of the self-observation and the psychological depth. Another obstacle that we find on this path are the moral codes. In society, there are many moral codes. There are many rules of behaviors, civil status, rules of civility, etc. And it turns out that all these moral codes, actually on the inner path, they are superfluous. And many of these can become actually a terrible obstacle to our inner work. Actually, the conventional morality is useless. Morality is just a slave of customs, of the time, of the place. What was moral in past ages is now just immoral. What was moral, for example, in the Middle Ages, for these modern times, can be totally immoral. What is moral in one country is immoral in another country. You can see that. So after a person begins to do the work to awaken his consciousness, he must start by being governed by his own consciousness, because consciousness is like timeless. It is always objective. In society, we find many like precepts that tell us that we have, for example, to study to be someone in life. That is like a moral code. And following that established code, we spend a large number of years in our lives in basic preparation, then secondary, then university, then the postgraduate, then the master's degree, then the specialties, etc. What, to have a job, to try to get money, to try to get comforts, to give ourselves luxuries, to have prestige, you know, to be someone in life. However, these are like personality objectives that will not lead us at all to develop anything real, anything permanent, since all the material achievements, all the successes of personality are going to be swallowed by time. When we die, they stay. The only thing that actually transcends time is the consciousness that we awaken. So, by following that pattern so defended by the moral codes of society, we waste all the time chasing subjective things, and we don't dedicate our existence, because we don't have even time, to achieve the true purpose of our life, to achieve the intimate self-realization of our being. But, well, actually the same, we could analyze many other moral codes. That if the family comes first, for example. And what we do with this moral code is that we close ourselves off, and we like limit our love to our family nucleus. And we forget that everyone on this planet is a brother, and we just don't sacrifice ourselves for humanity. Because why, right? And another, that we have to be believers of such a religion, or that we have to obey the rules of the government, you know. And if we don't decide to follow the what dictates our consciousness over and above what the leader says that it is correct, over and above what the model code says that is correct, we will end up making many mistakes that can even undermine our own energy, as for example with the things of the vaccination, for example. And well, we need to analyze all of this, like with reflection and psychological depth, work on all of those moral codes that are all the time trying to rule us over our consciousness. And well, another aspect that makes this path difficult is karma. We need to know that we owe huge amounts of karma. Every time that we let our psychological defects act instead of our consciousness, they are generating damage that remains in us as a karmic debt. And throughout our existences, we have harmed many people. We have committed many atrocities. And if we want to free ourselves, we must like settle all of our accounts. But actually, the divine law is fair, yeah, but also is merciful. And they put us as a requirement to be able to self-realize ourselves, that we have to pay only the pending karma of the last 7 existences. So on this path, we are going to be always paying karma. And every time that we eliminate a psychological defect, we must pay the karmic debt that defect has. And there, the importance of living, constantly working in favor of humanity, to be constantly generating the dharma that will allow us to pay for our karmic debts with love, so that we don't have to pay them with pain. But what happens is that sometimes the dharma that we make will not be enough to pay. And sometimes we will have to go through moments of crisis, through moments of illness, of pain, and through difficult situations, because we don't have enough dharma to pay, or because sometimes we are paying for hard karma that cannot be paid with love but needs to be paid with pain. But we have to be clear, and we need to be aware that we are paying for our karma. So it is important to constantly carry out that practice of the transfer of funds and the negotiations with the divine law that we learned in the lecture number 13 of laws of karma and dharma, in order to be paying for our karmic debts on a daily basis, so that the pain of karma don't make us stagnate in this path. And also be all the time practicing the sacrifice for humanity, helping others to awaken, because that will give us the strength and will give us the merits to advance in this inner work. Okay? And well, another difficult obstacle that this path has is the pseudo-esotericism. In pseudo-esotericism, we find many paths that promise to lead us to some higher goal by contacting, for example, spirits, or by contacting with aliens, or by taking mystical drugs, or by consulting shamans, sorcerers, that is a hard word, sorcerers, masters, or through the development of certain mental faculties, or by believing in someone or something. So we are going to see that there are multiple paths, but that they don't lead anywhere. Some of them even lead us to the abyss and the despair. And there are paths that have, for example, the objective of taking us towards nirvana and converting us into majesties of such zones of the universe. But those paths in no way are going to bring us back to our Father, back to our inner being. And we must realize this situation, and we must really have like our eyes wide open, since actually they can be very fascinating paths of the most holy appearance, ineffable, but unfortunately they can only lead us to the involution, and well, it doesn't like worth it, because we are going to continue there, just turning and turning around this wheel of samsara without really freeing ourselves. Okay, and well, finally, among the obstacles that we are going to find on this path are the trials to which every initiate is constantly subjected, and well, also the ones that are trying to become initiated. Because when one is trying to enter the path of initiation, and when we enter the path of initiation, we are already like starting to work, and there a series of terrible trials come to us, because they have to test the initiate in every way to see if that person really deserves to continue climbing that mountain or not. So we are going to be tested like daily, because it is like a rigorous discipline. And well, actually, to do well in these trials, the psychological work, to work on the psychological depth, is essential. They are going to put us trials of earth, of water, of air, and of fire. So we are going to experience these trials both in the astral plane, but also in the physical plane. And with these trials, they are going to be measuring us by the wisdom, the rectitude, and the love with which we face every difficult situation. For example, difficult situations with the economy, and that are going to be the trials of earth, or for example, our capacity of adapting to the different circumstances in life, and that are going to be our trials of water. Or they are going to be measuring how we face the loss of something or of someone, you know, our attachments, and that are going to be our trials of air. And they are going to be measuring in these trials how we deal with situations where lust or anger arises. And there we are going to be in trials of fire, okay? And what if we despair? If we don't know how to adapt to the different situations, if we react in a negative way, we are not going to pass these trials, and we are going to get stuck along the way, okay? There are moments of trials in which actually we feel alone, in which we like ask and we don't receive any answer, in which we feel as we have entered like a desert, and like if our inner being has abandoned us. But these are only trials where our capacity to follow the path is being measured. And if we are all the time practicing the psychological depth, we are going to do well in all of those trials. And actually passing the trials is giving us back advancement in the inner work. And well, as we have seen, this is a path with many dangers and many obstacles, and it is necessary this lecture so we really like know them, and that we know how to transcend them so we don't like get stuck. And when we find ourselves in the moment of despair, or feeling lonely, or feeling pain, or entering into crisis, remember not to stay there, to practice a psychological death, to reject like your natural tendency to fall into despair. Just remember that you are in a process. Remember that you are passing through a process, and work with patience and discipline with the 3 factors for the consciousness revolution. Practice the self-observation, the psychological depth, and you are going to get out from there with more strength, more clarity, and you are going to be receiving eternally the rewards for your consistency in your inner work. Sorry. And well, what happens? That you know that we are going to be entering this path. That this path is divided into 3 mountains, which are the mountains of initiation. We are going to enter the path of the initiation when we manage to ignite the sacred fire of the Kundalini, after we are working on achieving chastity in, well, all that process. And once we are there working in the creation of the solar bodies, when we are like there in the creation of the solar body of the wheel, of the causal body, right in the moment of the maximum sufferings and the conscious sacrifices, after choosing what is known as the direct path, right in that work, in that moment, the Christ will be born within us. And although the Christ is that revolutionary force that will come to help us so that we can do the real hard work, the real difficult path, that is the path of the second mountain, to do the work of the inner apocalypse, his arrival will be like beautiful, because as you know, as we were studying in the Christmas explanations, from the union of our human soul that is manufactured thanks to the creation of the 5 solar bodies: physical, vital, astral, mental, and causal, and our divine soul, which is our Buddhic body, that was raised all the time there, waiting for the true man to be formed. From that union between the human and the divine, the Christic fire is going to be born in the heart of man. And actually, the advent of the Christic fire is like the most important event of the life of any man. And this intimate Christ comes and takes charge of all of our mental, emotional, motor, instinctive, and sexual processes, as the electronic Kundalini is rising in the work of the second mountain. And well, this force comes to perform certain works in ourselves. For example, he's coming to now create the bodies of gold. So he's going to be turning these solar bodies into bodies of pure gold, so that these bodies can are pure enough to handle that powerful force. And what happens that when the mental body of gold ends, and we are creating the body of the wheel, the gold body of the wheel, this Christic force will turn 33 years old. And that is at that point when the Christ will completely incarnate in the person, because he is already prepared like for the strongest work. This Christ is also called the Hercules, because he has to face with those causal selves in hell, since on the first mountain we obtain like around 71 to 76% of consciousness. And well, actually we must reach 100%. And when the Christ is 33 years old, we have around 84% of consciousness. So that remaining consciousness is trapped in the heaviest psychological defects that we have, that are the 7 causal selves, so the 7 heads of legion. So the Christ must come and must face all those demons And that is going to be a very hard psychological work on the second mountain. We are going to continue on the second mountain working with our partner in sex, and well, making all these works. And the Christ must also pay for all the remaining karma that we have. Actually, in the first mountain, we pay for small karmas, but actually the Christ has to pay even the hard karma, in the total hard karma. That in that process, that is called the 8 years of job, which is a very painful disease. With that disease, all the crimes against the Holy Spirit are going to be paid. And this disease will cause that person a lot of suffering, but it will also help the person to see all those defects that must be eliminated. So the Christ will come to kill all the causal selves and to also take charge of the global teaching. So you can see that the real difficult path is the path of the second mountain, and we need to be aware of this. Because if we are from now thinking that this is going to be like heaven, that this is going to be like going, I don't know, into a cloud and feeling holy and put some, what is the name of that? I forgot. Burn some sage and, stop being like there. No, it's not at all. We are going to achieve total divinity at the end of this work, of this inner work. But actually, the work itself is hard, it's difficult. We need to know it, to be prepared in advance, to have the power and the strength to do this work, okay? And well, there is an aspect that will make the work of the Christ more difficult, and it is that the whole world will see him through his psychological glasses. So each person is going to reflect his own defects into Christ. No one will understand a Christ. That is why people will always judge him, and if possible, they will seek to kill him or attack him. Okay? Because the Christ will never conform to moral codes or to good customs. The Christ is like the truth, and the truth is always offensive to people. So really, if we have at this moment a Christ in front of us, we wouldn't recognize him at all. However, when the Christ completes the work of the second mountain, we will no longer have to feel pain or persecution, because all of the psychological defects are going to be eliminated. When we finish the work of the third mountain, we become gods, and we are no longer tied to the laws of pain and to this wheel of samsara. So actually, this is our goal, and we need to set that goal and work for that. Okay, the path is difficult, okay, the path is hard, but we have the tools. We have the psychological depth. We have that various information about how powerful is our sexual energy, and we have that tool of love, of helping others. So we have all the information and all the tools that we need to advance in this inner path. And well, people, this has been today's lecture. Actually, I think it is a hard lecture, because yes, it faces with the truth that this is not something easy, but it's a very, very important information that if we are really aiming to awaken our consciousness, is very useful for us. And well, I want to invite you to our next lecture that we are going to be studying on next week, in which we are going to be seeing another very interesting topic. We are going to be studying about a non-identification with everyday things, and we are going to be studying why we are all the time judging others. So don't miss that very interesting lecture. And well, remember that if at any point you have any question, just leave your questions there, in the video, and I will be gladly solving any question that you have. Okay, so thank you very much to all of you, and well, see you the next time. Ciao, ciao.